It's going to be sent out to a handful of people that bought the nap pack this week. For those that sent pre-submitted questions, some of you may have already sent some pre-submitted questions, and I'm going to answer those today. So that's how it's going to work. I'm going to go through. I had about 7 pre-submitted questions. Some of them I go into a lot of detail, just because I felt like I just wanted to go into a little bit more on a specific topic related to that. I really wanted to make sure that we covered all bases. And then after that, we're just going to have an open Q&A. We can have a quick chat. I'm going to have this chat open, so if there's any questions, let me know, and I'm going to hopefully get all of this answered for you and have you feeling confident and ready to go, because you have got some great resources and I just want to help you to utilize them the best that you can in the best way that I can, which is with sharing with you. So let's go. Okay, so let's go with these pre-submitted questions. I just have to, my screen is being covered up with the questions, so I can't even read them. Okay, question 1. I co-sleep and we have contact naps with my 10-week-old for 10 weeks now, so the whole life. Not by choice, just the only way to get him and keep him asleep so he can grow and thrive. I get it. I did that with my first, so no shame there. He has reflux and it has thrown me through a loop. The nap guide says to start with nights first. If we co-sleep, does that mean that we are not ready to try things to help naps? Are there any tips to stop co-sleeping and only contact naps in the day? Feels like I'm just waiting for sleep learning to be possible. Okay, this is a great question, and this one is one of them that I go into a lot of detail. So if you're watching the recording and this isn't your question, you can skip through, but I have some great suggestions. So I do always suggest starting with nights first when it comes to sleep teaching itself. So the act of teaching your baby to fall asleep in their crib by themselves, and sleeping those long stretches and connecting those sleep cycles. So I do always suggest to start with nights first and bedtime first when it comes to sleep teaching itself. With that said, you can still work on prep. You can still work on nailing those wake times. You can get help your baby get comfortable with their crib, with their new bedroom. If you're moving from room sharing to a new bedroom, you can also use newborn friendly methods for sleep teaching 1 or 2 times a day, I say here, but I also mean at bedtime as well, if you want to as well. So that it doesn't mean that you can't do anything just because I suggest with doing nights first. You can still work on prep, nailing wake times, getting comfortable with the crib, environment, all of that stuff, which is all covered in the nap guide. And you can also use newborn friendly methods for sleep teaching 1 or 2 times a day, or at bedtime. So these newborn friendly methods are the sleep ladder and pick up put down, or PUPD. All of these are shared in detail. Excuse me, I'm just gonna have a drink of water. All of these are shared in detail in the Ultimate Nap Guide. So these are a lot more gradual. They take a lot more time. They are definitely not quick fixes, although I do get lots of messages being like, what the heck? So sometimes it can just like be like a real instant kind of boost when it comes to sleeping and helping your baby be comfortable in the crib. But it takes some time. But all of this is going to be helpful to you, and it's all exposure to the crib. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some specifics on transitioning from co-sleeping, or transitioning your baby into their own room. We're going to do that in just the next slide. But I also wanted to kind of jump in and add here, you can technically use a variation of a quick check method for sleep teaching around 12-ish weeks and above. But I don't recommend this a lot, like to the masses, because you really have to be committed, you really have to be intentional, and you really have to have appropriate expectations. So whereas I do feel like you can work on sleep teaching, because you mentioned before in this, you know, I just feel like I'm waiting for sleep learning to be possible. It technically is possible at a younger age. You just have to be committed to prep, because prep is not fluff, And you also, you want to be very intentional, and you want to have extremely appropriate expectations, because a 12-week-old, although it does happen, I say this all the time, there are definitely people that have 10 to 12 hours straight at 12 weeks. I think there was a couple of nights where Isabel at 11 or 12 weeks got a really long stretch, but that was like the only time. It was a very much a one-time thing, and it's not something that I share as an expectation. So in terms of sleep teaching at bedtime at this young age, I would focus only on bedtime. You can use a mix of the resources that we have in the nap pack, so the ultimate nap guide and the wake time vault. It will have routine suggestions, because that is a huge part of it. And then you want to follow a plan. So if you're really serious about this and you want to do it, I worked on sleep teaching with Lily. I didn't do it till she was 16, 17 weeks. We did work on newborn techniques for a long time before then. But with Isabel, I was confident. Like, I knew what the heck I was doing. I had been through the ringer. I'd been a sleep consultant for a while. I felt good about it. I had been working on sleep shaping stuff since day one. It excited me. It was the right time for me. And then around like 11 or 12 weeks, I focused on bedtime specifically. I didn't do anything else. I just did bedtime. But I had a plan. I was very intentional, and I expected night wakings. We still had 2 to 3 night feeds over the 12 hours. But it can be done. So I just feel like I just wanted to share that it is an option. There isn't like a magic time to do it. It's just more about your intention and your commitment to it, and then expectations. Okay, so let's have a look at some tips for transitioning from co-sleeping to your baby being in their own space. So this could be in a bassinet next to you, or it could be you moving from your baby being in the same room as you to their own room, or their own space in a room. Many of you may know that my daughter went from being in the bassinet right next to me, and we decided I wanted her close but not too far, and so she's in our vented closet, which is a great option. So if that's an option for you, it's a good one if your closet's vented, because it's nice and closed, but it still gives them that space. So tip 1, practice laying baby down in their crib. And this doesn't mean that you're going to get great naps. This can be 5 minutes. It can be 10 minutes. It can be 20 minutes. It's at first, if they're not used to being in their crib, practice laying them down, and you can practice them laying them down at bedtime, even if it's just their first stretch of sleep, and then you spend the rest of the time co-sleeping. That is a great first start. Same with naps. If you place them down in their crib, they wake up after 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes, and then you cuddle them back to sleep and you have a contact nap for the rest of the time. That's step 1. And that can only help them, because similar to how I always say contact naps can help your baby sleep at night. It's because it helps them get the sleep that they need, but you're still providing them that exposure to the crib, so that it's not a scary place and it's not somewhere that's foreign and different to them. Which leads me to play in their crib or in their bedroom. So you want the crib to be fun and like a happy place. You want this to not be somewhere where they're just left alone and bored and ready to sleep when they want to be awake and fun and having fun and cuddling. You play in the day, play with them. The fact that you are having fun with them, put a mobile in there, play with toys, play peekaboo, whatever their age is, play in their crib, so that it's a fun place. It's not unusual, it's not weird. It's somewhere where you play with them and it's part of their lives. This is going to help with any kind of, what is the word? Oh my gosh, I've lost my words. Foreignness. That's what the word that I keep saying, but it's not the right word. There's a better word for it, but if it being weird, any weirdness that they feel, this is going to make it familiar to them. Other things that you can do: sleep with their sheets. So if they have crib sheets in their new crib, or in their bassinet, sleep with them in your bed for a few days. It's going to smell like you, and it's just going to make them feel a lot better than like a crisp white Walmart flavor, or not flavor, Walmart smell, or smelling like Tide dish, not dish soap. What the heck is wrong with me and my words? I'm very sorry. Tide washing detergent. So it just is nice if it smells like you. You can do the same with their sleep sack. Excuse me, I'm just gonna wait when it's not there. I'm having allergies right now, which apparently is very common in Northern America. It's having allergies around August. Do your bedtime routine in the new bedroom, or so this is especially helpful for if you're moving to a new bedroom or a new area. Do your bedtime routine in that new bedroom. It does the same thing. It provides that connection between bedtime and their new sleep space, but it also just lets them be familiar with that. So change them in there, feed them in there, read books, do your little cuddle and sing, and then go ahead and place them down where they usually sleep at bedtime. You can do this for a long time before doing any kind of sleep teaching. Some other slower options if you're wanting to move away from co-sleeping. A lot of people love sidecar cribs. They're also known, I think, as next to me cribs, where basically it's a one-sided crib where it attached to your bed. It's really close, but it's their own separate space. These can be really good, especially if they're not like rolling around yet, because then they end up, they don't end up like kind of scurrying over to you again. But this allows you to be close. You can soothe them by hand holding. You can practice pausing, which I talk about a lot in all of my resources, but pausing and just not feeding them immediately, it just provides them a little bit of exposure to having a little bit of a longer stretch without nursing, without having a bottle. When they're used to co-sleeping being constantly attached to you, if that's sometimes when you're co-sleeping, they're constantly attached to your breast the whole time, it's going to take some time. But kind of habit stacking with hand holding, patting, rubbing, you're stroking their hair, shushing, things like that. All of this is inside the Ultimate Nap Guide, by the way, in the, I think it's the sleep ladder newborn section. All of this is really helpful with transitioning from co-sleeping. It takes patience, it takes practice, especially if you want to do it slowly. You can do it a lot faster. You can just go straight to it, but if you're wanting to make it a little bit of a shorter transition, a longer transition, a more gradual transition, all of this will help you long term. The younger you start, easier it will be. Doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that if you have a co-sleeping 15-month-old, it means that they will never be able to sleep in their own bed. That's not true. It just means that there's more exposure, so it means it's going to happen sooner. Just technically, it works out that way. Okay, question 2. Is there a way to determine if they're going to refuse one nap? For example, we went to the library 1 hour before her nap time. We stayed for 30 minutes as not to abuse her wake window or have her awake too long. On the way home, she showed sleepy signals, got home, put her to bed, and she absolutely refused it. Took her out. She was totally fine till bedtime. Otherwise, I would have stayed longer at the library. Of course, we did an early bedtime. I'll learn that from you. Heck yeah. We're all about early bedtimes here. Okay, great question. My suggestions. Nap refusals do happen. It's very common. It happens to me with both of my girls. Some babies will refuse naps more often. It's a lot to do with temperament. But they do happen. So you're not technically doing anything wrong, especially if it's unusual, if it's random. Early bedtime and move on. You did the right thing. I would have definitely suggested that as a way to move forward. There isn't necessarily a way to determine a nap refusal. It could be an off day. They could be having in a sleep regression. They could be overstimulated. They could be teething. They could just be, like I said, an off day. And it's just sometimes it happens and it's normal. You're not necessarily doing anything wrong, so don't stress so much about it. That I still have days where my babies refuse naps and it just happens. If it's chronic, then it could be time to drop a nap, especially if it's like they're refusing that third nap constantly and they're on 3 naps, or they're refusing that second nap constantly. Long term, that could be definitely something you can do. So all of that information is inside the Ultimate Nap Guide and the 2-to-1 nap class. So if you need to drop a nap, go back to the basics. That is like one of the things that I always suggest. If your baby is constantly doing this, if this is chronic, if this has been happening for weeks on end, we go back to the basics, change things up, go back to your wake time vault, which is inside this package. Go back to your wake time vault and see whether or not you need to change up the daily routine. Even though especially between the ages of like 7 and 14 months, your baby's going to be on 2 naps for the majority of that time. But things change throughout that. There's going to be some changes that you're going to have to make throughout that time. So even though they're on 2 naps a day for a long time, that doesn't mean they're going to be on the exact same like schedule, or things are going to be exactly the same for that whole time. You could just need to bring it back to the basics, go back to the prep section of the nap guide, make sure that they're comfortable falling asleep on their own. If they're not doing that yet, you can have a look into that and see whether or not that is something that you're wanting to do at this time. If they were doing it and now they're not, go back to the basics, bring it back, because that is going to be something that is going to get you back on track with it. Okay, question 3. How does reflux affect naps? If my 5-month-old is sleeping through the night in his bassinet, nice, how will moving him to his crib for night sleep be affected when all naps are done in the crib? Okay, so reflux can definitely affect sleep. I have experienced that myself with my first. If you don't know this already, my first had terrible reflux. It was silent reflux and it was just awful. Had a horrible time with it. And I have a whole blog all about reflux, which if you're listening, if you could link to the reflux blog, that would be fab. I am going to share a few tips now. And then if you're in my newborn course, I have an entire section on reflux there as well. But one main thing, be mindful of milk before bed. So you want to hold them upright. You want to have their milk at the beginning of bedtime routine instead of like right before they go to bed. And hold them upright. So this can be in the bath seat, this can be reading books, this can be just having having them on your knees and you just playing together for a little bit. Hold them upright so that they have some time for that milk to settle, so that once you place them down and they're on their backs, it's not going to just like immediately come up. It's provided some time for them to settle. 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes max really is fine. So feeding at the beginning of the bedtime routine can be nice. That can be incredibly helpful. Don't be afraid to contact your healthcare provider for future suggestions. Often reflux tapers away by 5-6 months. Sometimes when they start solids, it can help. The peak of reflux is usually between 3 and 4 months. So the fact that your baby is 5 months, I like to think that they are most likely on the mend when it comes to reflux. If your bassinet is flat and they're sleeping through the night already, or sleeping through with a quick feed, whatever it is, it shouldn't make any difference for him to be in his crib. But definitely use these tips for moving into the new space. So in terms of going from a bassinet to a crib, it can take some time for them to just get used to it. And it can usually take like 1 to 5 or 6 days, where they might just have more frequent wakings or something like that. But use those tips for transitioning from co-sleeping and moving into a new space in this situation as well, because it will definitely help. It'll help that time be a little bit shorter. But if the bassinet is flat, it shouldn't make any difference. And if anything, it's just going to help, because as your baby's getting bigger, they definitely are going to want some more space. They're going to want to be rolling around all over the place. This is that age where they're going to be all over the crib, and they'll love having that extra space. Okay, question 4. My baby is 3.5 months old and will only contact nap or nap in her swing. Classic. Any specific tips on how to transition her into her crib? Should I stop swing naps completely? Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, let's have a look at these suggestions. So when it comes to naps, so what age do you say? 3.5 months. When it comes to naps, I always say, and I mentioned this in the Ultimate Nap Guide as well, just focus on 1 to 2 naps a day in the crib. If they can do more, that's great. Love it. But don't stress if you're only focusing on 1 or 2 naps a day. I mentioned this in the nap guide, but the first nap can often be the easiest of the day. This isn't always the case for every baby, but it can be. So I always suggest starting with that first nap. The sleep drive is higher, just because anyway, I won't go into the reasoning, but just start with 1 or 2 naps a day. Contact naps can be really helpful for night sleep. I say this all the time. It helps to reduce any overtiredness that contributes to those unnecessary night wakings. It helps them to get the rest that they need to be able to learn something new if you're sleep teaching at bedtime eventually. So contact naps are not a problem unless they're a problem for you, unless like it's affecting you mentally. You don't need to feel guilty about it. You can absolutely work on 1 or 2 or more a day, but it can actually be helpful initially in encouraging really good night's sleep. In terms of swing naps, I will say that they should be supervised. I'm not like against swing naps in general, but some swings, and it really just depends on each swing, some swings can just put your baby in a compromising position in terms of their breathing right here, because it moves their neck forward and kind of, I wish I had a straw to kind of show you, but it just bends a straw. So it just means that breathing room is a little bit pinched. So if they're in a swing, try and make sure that it's one that allows their neck to kind of be open so that it allows for breathing room, and always have it supervised. In total, in general, I usually prefer contact naps and then working on crib naps, but I don't think that swing naps should be, especially when they're younger. They can be really helpful and for just like time awake. You also may find that once you've worked on this, once you've been working on 1 or 2 naps a day, once baby is sleeping through the night in their crib, she might actually prefer being in a crib versus the swing. So keep that in mind. A lot of this, like, oh, my baby loves the swing, how can I get rid of the swing? They love it. A lot of it is just because they didn't know that they could nap in their crib, or they didn't know that they could feel comfortable. And all of this that I've just been talking about, all of the prep, all of the sleep teaching that's in these resources that you've purchased, is going to contribute to them really loving their crib more than they would ever sleep in a swing. 3 months is a tricky age. You said your baby is 3.5 months. It's tricky because they're not a newborn anymore. They're kind of coming out of that sleepy newborn stage. They're harder to get to sleep usually at this age because often they've been rocked to sleep, which is absolutely fine. It's normal, or nursed to sleep. But they're just really overstimulated. But they're not like quite a full-blown infant where you can kind of expect a little bit more in terms of learning. You can begin sleep teaching at bedtime soon, like around 4-ish months, and I mentioned you can do it a little bit earlier with lots of intention, but at this age you've got a couple of weeks. Similar to the first question that I answered earlier, focus on prep, focus on environment, focus on getting that sweet spot. I have a blog, or Meg, what is it called? What is it called? Getting over the overtired cycle. I know that the URL is literally /blog/overtired cycle. That blog has a section in it that talks about finding the sweet spot. It helps you to know how, like, depending on how quickly your baby fell asleep, be that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, breaking the overtired cycle. You got it, Meg. Love her. Definitely reference that, save that, because that is what's going to help you nail the wake time, is figuring out like how well she goes to sleep, at what time, track sleep, and then a combination of using the wake time vault, using tracking sleep teaching. All of this is going to help you feel so much more comfortable and understanding your baby's sleep. But yes, you can focus on all of the prep initially first. Okay, question 5. I have followed sleepy cues instead of wake windows when I see my baby yawning, and then it's too short of a wake window and they never fall asleep. So I've ruined that nap. Well, you didn't ruin the nap. First things first, you didn't ruin the nap. We're all just doing our best here, all right? I used to feel that way as well. I get so many messages of people like, I ruined it. I just ruined it the whole day. You didn't ruin it. It's just an off day. And it just takes some time to like figure it out. I waited like 25 minutes and nothing. What do I do in this case? My baby is tired, but doesn't go down for a nap. 1-year-old baby. I will say that it's kind of classic at this age to regress a little bit. To have there's just so much growth happening. I talk about it in my free sleep regression course. I have a 12-month section, which talks you through why. So if you are feeling like you're having like a 12-month sleep regression, definitely go and listen to that section in the free course because it's just very telling of what's going on. But this is why I like to follow both wake windows and sleepy cues. Wake windows are helpful on their own individually. Same with sleepy cues. You put them, well, sorry if that was loud. You put them together. You put wake windows and sleepy cues together, and you've just got like a great mixture of intuition and science, and everything is going to work out so much better. Use your intuition, but keep in mind wake times. If they woke up 45 minutes ago and they're 12 months old, and you're just like, well, they must be tired. They're showing their sleepy cues. Stop and think for a second and be like, they've only been awake 45 minutes. They're usually awake at least 2.5 to 3 hours. I'm going to keep that in mind. Especially, and that's the lower end of a 12-month-old. A higher end of a 12-month-old could be 3 to 4 hours awake in that first wake time. So keep that in mind. I think it's fine to use your intuition and put your baby down a little bit earlier than usual, even up to an hour earlier than usual. But this takes a lot of trial and error. You're going to be more confident when you use the wake windows as a guide and use your baby's sleepy cues. And also keep in mind that a fussy baby doesn't always equal tired. There's a lot of reasons that your baby could be fussy, teething, separation anxiety. They're learning a new skill. They're hungry. They are bored. Boredom. I should have written that one down. Boredom is a big thing. Take them outside. If you're finding your baby's super, super duper fussy, take them outside. Do water play or something like that. I think I actually talked about this in the 2-to-1 nap class, which you have access to. I talk about how to extend not night waking. We don't want to extend night wakings. How to extend wake times when baby is ready, when you're just finding that they're getting kind of fussy because they are on the tail end, right? They're stretching wake time that's longer than they've ever had before. But if you put them down early, then they just will cry and not be having any of it, and then it just goes into this cycle of, well, they get all worked up and then they don't go to sleep. So it's about finding that sweet spot. I would check in this situation specifically. I would check that nights are going well, and by that I mean that baby is falling asleep at bedtime without fuss. They're sleeping all night with just 1 or 2 feeds max. Typically this age I would expect like either sleeping all the way through the night or just one feed occasionally. I talked about this before, but I have a 17-month-old. She's 17 months old, and for the most part she sleeps through the night, but sometimes she still has a feed. She actually had one last night. And it can be random. It can be due to growth spurts, things like that. So it's not all set in stone. I don't want you to feel that way. But in terms of bedtime going well, they're falling asleep at bedtime, they're doing well with a deep, and they're sleeping decently long stretches, if not all the way through. In terms of suggestions, at 1-year-old, it's tricky. And this is the 2-to-1 nap transition class is going to be helpful, but they typically are between 1 and 2 naps. If they're closer to 14 to 18 months, most likely going to be on 1 nap, or at the very least moving towards that. If they're just 1-year-old, they're still likely to have 2 naps. And I talk in so much more detail about how to navigate this in the 2-to-1 nap class. and it's exactly for this age. So definitely check that one out, and it will have sample suggestions specific to this age as well. So definitely go and check that one out. Okay, question 6. My 1-year-old baby naps 2 naps a day, and her naps are 1.5 hours each nap. How do I extend that nap to 2 hours or 2.5 hours or 3 hours? After the 1.5 hours, she wakes up happy, but I feel like she could sleep at least 2 hours. Once she wakes up, I don't rush. I let her talk and play in the crib until she can stand and call for attention. That's when I go in. But I feel like she can do 2 hours. Is that something is that is that something that eventually, once she transitions to 1 nap a day, she will extend? She falls asleep independently for naps. By the way, I really liked that you told me some background information. That's really helpful. So yes, for babies that are on 2 naps a day, 1 to 1.5 hours is actually great. So with her being on 2 naps, with her being on 2 naps, I wouldn't expect her to have those really long naps, because she's having 2 a day. Again, I go into this in detail, like navigating 2 naps versus 1 nap and going between the two in the 2 to 1 nap class. It'll be very helpful to you. But in terms of her right now at this age, if she's only 12 months old, 1 to 1.5 hours per nap, great. She's meeting sleep needs for the day. And she'll eventually transition to those longer naps, like 2, 3 plus even, once she's on 1 nap a day. Again, usually happens around 4 to 16 months. It takes practice. Sometimes we need some pausing between sleep cycles at first, which it sounds like you're already doing. Sometimes it takes a little bit of actual sleep teaching. A lot of it is to do with timing, pausing, and all of this is talked about in a lot of detail in the 2 to 1 nap class. So definitely go ahead and check that one out. And you should get all the materials for that as well. So there are some written slides that you can reference easily, as well as the actual class replay. Okay, question 7. I think this one's the last one. What to do when naps are short, like less than 2 hours, and when they're tired before bedtime? I know option 1 is early bedtime, but what about option 2? Sometimes early bedtime means early wake time. Thank you, you're the best. Thanks. I feel like I should have. Anyway. Okay, the best option is early bedtime, if possible. But obviously, sometimes it's not possible. So you can offer a potential cat nap, especially if baby sleeps in the car or in the stroller, or if they will just like fall asleep when they're out and about. Some kids do that. None of my babies have, but it does happen. So if your baby easily falls asleep in the car, I think it's fine to offer a cat nap on the days that when they are less than 2 hours, when they're a shorter nap and they're on 1 nap per day. One thing to keep in mind, a 4 p.m. cat nap of like 10. So cat nap to me is like 10 minutes to, I would say 45 minutes max, but typically like 10, 20, 30 minutes. It doesn't necessarily mean a late bedtime. Yesterday, my 3.5-year-old, she doesn't nap anymore, but she naps at her preschool. She'll nap at her preschool a couple of times a week, which kind of ties her over. But on the days that she's home and on weekends, she rarely naps. But if we're out and about, sometimes she will crash out in the car. She napped for 20 minutes at 4 p.m. while we were on the way back from the grocery store. I kind of let it happen for a little bit, and then once it had been about 20 minutes, I was like, you know what, we're gonna get her up. So I was home, so it just didn't make sense to just sit there when it's 120 degrees outside in a running car in my garage. So she still went to bed at 7 p.m. with these short cat naps, and I believe I talk about this in the 2 to 1 nap class, but I'm not sure, so I'll mention it a little bit. But these short naps, like 20 minutes, they're not going to support a full wake time. Sometimes it just kind of resets their sleep drive for like an hour to an hour and a half, 2 hours. As they're older, it could be a little bit longer. But I don't truly believe in danger naps unless they're like 5 p.m. and you let them sleep like 45 minutes to 2 hours or something. That is a danger nap, obviously. But a quick cat nap, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of putting them to bed early. Expect a false start if she has if she doesn't catnap, and even if she does catnap, but if expect a false start, which is when your baby wakes up like 40, or your child wakes up at 45 minutes after bedtime. Expect them, they happen, especially during this age, this nap transition age. Honestly, they happen on and off all the way to 3 and 4 and 5 years old, depending on your baby's sleep needs. But expect a false start, treat accordingly. I have a whole section on that inside the 2-to-1 nap class. And I also have a section on that in my baby course as well, if your baby's under 18 months. But it's also in the 2-to-1 nap class, which all of you here have access to. Early waking tips. Okay, you mentioned early waking, so I just kind of wanted to add a little bit of extra value for you. Bedtime is typically 12 hours from their wake time. Keep that in mind as a rule of thumb. That is always on the back of my mind, to keep things as simple as possible. If my baby woke up at 7, they're most likely to wake up at 7. Go to bed at 7. So wake up at 7, most likely to go to bed around 7. If they napped longer than average for their age, then, which I write those averages inside the nap guide, but if they're napping longer than their age's average, their bedtime might be later. If they're having short naps, then their bedtime's going to be a little bit earlier. Keep in mind that chronic early wakings, where your baby is chronically waking up at 4, 5, 45, 5:45 a.m. and earlier, it's a long game. It takes time. It takes a lot of consistency. And there is a pattern which works best. When I am working with people, and I've worked with people one-on-one for several weeks with this, I've experienced early morning wakings myself with my firstborn. I've been able to completely prevent them with Isabel using all of my own tips. Obviously, sometimes that they happen occasionally, but in terms of chronic early wakings, where we have those early wakings between 3 and 4, months at a time, we haven't had that because I take the steps to prevent it. So when it comes to early wakings, don't focus on early wakings unless night sleep is going moderately well. So they can still have night feedings. Then their naps are going pretty well. They don't have to be perfect, but they're going pretty well. They're having decent naps. They know how to fall asleep, blah, blah, blah. Then that's when, if you're still having early wakings at this point, then you can start focusing on preventing those, and a plan of action for that. Below 18 months or so, I just noticed that there isn't a capital letter. Okay, if you are in any of my stuff and you notice that there are typos on my Instagram, I know I have a lot of typos. Just remember, I'm usually working at like 9 p.m. So anyway, excuse the typos. I need to go back to that. You get good information that just may be in the form of a typo. If your baby is below 18 months or so, give or take, it could be even a little bit older, depending on you, don't be afraid to feed, nurse, and place back down. That is my first point of call for early morning wakings, cuddling them back to sleep, getting them used to not starting the day at 4 a.m. Because the hardest thing you can do is like have them start the day at 4 a.m. It takes some time. There's lots of different ways, and I have a whole early waking guide. Some of you grabbed, I think I had like an option to add on the early waking guide when you bought the nap pack, and a few of you did that. This is going to be helpful to you. I wouldn't jump in right away until, as I said, night sleep and then naps are feeling good. I don't want you to be overwhelmed, but once that's going good, focus on the early waking guide. I also have a blog as well, Meg, if you can link that, and I will I think it's 5 top culprits for early wakings, and that will be helpful. But I just kind of wanted to throw in a few really helpful tips when it comes to early wakings. Bedtime being 12 hours is a good one. Feeding and cuddling, don't be afraid to kind of just hold them and just make that a little bit easier overall, to help them get used to waking up a little bit later. And it's a long game. It takes some time. Okay, time for an open Q&A. I know I think there's just a handful of you here live today. So let me know if you've got any follow-up questions. I'm gonna have a quick drink, and I'd be happy to help you. Isabel's currently napping, my youngest. She's in the glorious stage of the one nap life. My 2-to-1 nap class, I named it Loving the One Nap Life, because I love the one nap life, because you do get that solid 2 to 3+ hours in the middle of the day. It's honestly the reason I've been able to do this call is because she went to sleep at 11:45, and she's probably not going to be waking up until 3 or so. Okay. Hello. Any tips on how to get my 11-week-old to nap without the swaddle? For example, going to a family cookout and a swaddle and a crib and a bassinet are not available. Classic. Yeah, of course. I attempted to lay him down without being swaddled, and he ended up not napping and being miserable for the rest of the evening. On days like this, have a nap in the wrap if he does it. Does he like being baby worn and getting to sleep that way? Because that kind of provides that swaddled feeling. It's kind of like literally the opposite of a swaddle. The swaddle kind of helps them to feel like they're being baby worn, and baby wearing helps it feel like a swaddle. When you're out, I go by the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, do your thing, swaddle, have them in a nice dark room, have a great sleep environment. 20% of the time, go to the family cookout and have him sleep in the wrap or in the stroller, if that helps. Take him on a walk and have him sleep in the stroller. But I always use baby wearing when we were out and about. I would, even if it needed, as they get older, I would have to take her away from the commotion and kind of like bounce her a little bit in it. But in terms of like just avoiding the overtiredness, don't be afraid of a quick contact nap when you're out and about. Live your life, and it will hopefully prevent him from being miserable for the rest of the evening. Okay, question 2 from Marissa. My baby makes it about from about 7 p.m. to 4 or 5-ish between feeds. That's fab. 11 weeks old. I feel like I'm stuck at this 5 a.m. hour. Most of the time he's done eating. It's always 5:30. I put him back down. He sleeps until I wake him at 7:30. Should I try and have him wait until he's close to 6 to eat when he's able to make it all night between feeds? Also, this throws off the feed schedule, waking and eating, because he isn't very hungry at 7 a.m. Yes, this does make sense. Okay. I actually have a lot to say about this. Sorry, I'm like one of those people that has to sit cross-legged or like with my leg up. So sorry if I'm always like shifting around. Okay, first things first, don't try. I mean, you can try and stretch him till 6 a.m. and that's absolutely fine. But if he's going to bed at 7 and he will go back to sleep after a feeding and until you wake him at like 7:30 or even 8, you can let him sleep till 8 because he's doing good. I love to feed and put back down, because if you try and stretch him till 6 a.m., then 6 a.m. becomes his new awake time. If you want to keep 7 to 8 a.m. as your wake up time, allow the 4 to 5:30, 5:45, even if you woke up at 6, feed and place him back down, even if it's just for a couple of minutes. I talk about this in my early waking guide. All it does is just say, we don't wake up at 5 a.m., 5:45, 6 a.m., 6:30, and you can gently stretch it over time. Feeding at this age is really normal in the middle of the night. The fact that you're getting such a good stretch is fab. I love that. Love that. Obviously, you're doing all the right things. But I don't be afraid to feed and put back down, even if he feeds until 6 a.m. and it's technically morning. Feed, put back down, see if you can start morning at 7 a.m. In terms of it throwing off the feeding schedule, that is a struggle bus. What I would do was I would just offer a smaller feeding in the morning, and then it would, I would offer it, and she would drink until she was full, and then the rest of the day we would kind of just like keep going. I think it's fine because he's still getting the nutrients that he needs. I would still offer the feeding. Sorry, I didn't want to be taught. I always say she because I have girls, and so I'm always worried that I'm using the wrong gender. But so I know it's tricky. I would just offer the morning feed, even if he only takes, you know, I don't know if you're nursing, but if he only takes 1 ounce or 2 ounces or just nurses for a couple of minutes, that is still a really good routine, as I have milk when I wake up. And then, you know, it just gets onto it doesn't matter how much that they're drinking. It's more about the routine of, I have milk when I wake up for the day. And I like to have that first morning feed outside of the bedroom. I always talk about that as well in my other resources. Do you wash or should wash teeth after a bottle of milk? What if they fall asleep drinking? This is a good question. Ariana. Hi, Ariana. Because Isabel, I'm sure some of you might know this, went to sleep. We did sleep training. She did great. And then I can't remember what triggered it, but I gave her a bottle to go to sleep. It was really easy. It was right after I finished nursing, and I was like, I love this freedom. She loved getting cozy, and it just worked. I think we did it when she was sick or something, and it just worked great. And that's why I stopped. So we did that for 3 or 4 months, and I was worried about her little teeth. So that's why I moved on, and now I've done some habit stacking. Now she has a bottle. She kind of uses her bottle like a pacifier, but she just has water in it now. And then I do brush her teeth before bed. So I think ask your dentist. I'm definitely not a pediatric dentist or anything like that. But they will definitely encourage not falling asleep feeding and having like brushing your teeth. I'm doing this because we have like one of those little finger things that you put like toothpaste on. But I try and do that before we put her down, and then now she has water, which obviously isn't gonna affect things any negatively. How do I know if a baby is associated with milk for sleep? 1-year-old. Tips on giving her milk before the bedtime routine and still make her understand that it's time to sleep without the bottle. Okay, we did this a little bit with Isabel. Go right back to the basics. If you're noticing that your baby can't go to sleep without the bottle, which is what happened to us with Isabel, for a while we would go back and forth. Sometimes she would go to sleep on her own, sometimes she would go to sleep with a bottle, and then I started to notice she was waking more frequently, wanting that bottle in her bed again, filled with nice warm fresh milk. And that's when I was like, okay, this is becoming an unhelpful association. It's not helpful to me anymore. I talk about sleep associations a lot. There's nothing bad or good. It's just whether or not they're helpful to you or unhelpful to you. And it went from being helpful to unhelpful. And that's when I reined it back. I brought it back. We went back to the basics. I did sleep teaching at bedtime again. I focused on the prep, and we worked on sleep teaching at bedtime. I followed my exact plan inside my baby sleep course. So if you're inside my course, go right back to the basics and work on falling asleep independently again at bedtime. If you feel that the bottle to sleep is becoming an issue in terms of extra night wakings, or they are just unable to fall asleep without a bottle of milk in their hands. Another suggestion, I think I mentioned this earlier, I like habit stacking a little bit. So we just switch the bottle of milk to a bottle of water. And that our next step is no bottle. And I will get there when I'm ready to get there. As a mother right now, that's what I'm choosing to do. And I'm happy with it. It's a tip that I like because it's a gradual way. It just helps this process be a lot easier. Okay, Lauren. Hi, Lauren. I had question number 1. I do practice 1 to 3 naps a day in the bassinet, and then I also put him down in his bassinet for bedtime. He will usually only sleep there for 1 to 2 hours and then wake up and won't go back. Should I just keep doing this until I sleep teach? Is this good practice? I do think it is good practice. He is also put himself to sleep in the bassinet the past 2 nights, but doesn't seem to help with the night stress at all. It also, I think you mentioned that your baby is 11 weeks, Lauren. Is that right? But okay, 4:30. Oh wait, Meg. 1:30 PST. So Meg's in a different time zone. Okay, 11 weeks. So these extra night wakings could just be due to a growth in general. You may have heard of this 4-month sleep progression. I don't like to speak to it as an event waiting to happen, but a lot of changes do happen between 3 and 5 months. Not exactly 4 months old, not exactly 3 months old, not exactly 5 months old to the date, that around this age, when they're coming out of the newborn stage, their sleep cycles begin to mature. They go from just having 1 or 2 sleep cycles just to having 1 to 2 sleep cycles, and move towards having adult-like sleep cycles where they're going in and out of sleep every 45 minutes to 2 hours every single night. And that's typically what's happening. And it can take some time. Meg, if you could post the 4-month regression blog, I don't know if you've read this already, Lauren, but it has options for what to do. There's different options of how to handle the 4-month sleep regression if you're deciding to sleep teach or not right away. I think it's great that he knows already how to put himself to sleep, and the fact that you're having him in his bassinet for naps a couple times a day. This is great exposure. This is a really tricky age, so I just want to validate you on that. This is honestly one of the hardest ages for me. I really struggled. This is actually at the point where I had a bit of a mental breakdown with Isabel when she was 10 or 11 weeks. I was like, I just remember bouncing her a lot and just being like, I'm having a really hard time right now. Even though I knew all the things, I snapped out of it and everything went fine. So you have hope, but just, I get it. It's a really hard time, but you're doing a lot of the really good things that will be really helpful. And then you see that 1 2 hours. Oh yes, so final tip, you have the ultimate nap guide in this package. Right now, when he wakes up, just go back to the sleep ladder or pick up, put down. And this can be after he wakes up from a nap or after he wakes up from his first stretch in his bassinet. Even if all it does is lengthen his sleep for 10, 12, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 seconds, is all exposure, and it's all going to be helpful to you when you're ready to sleep teach. If and when you get to that point, I don't know if you're already inside, but I have my Cozy Baby Sleep course, which is for ages 4 to 18 months, and that will help guide you through it. In fact, the course has a very hands-on method that you could try using before 4 months. And then, as I mentioned before, there is a way to do it to sleep teach if you do it intentionally. So hopefully that helps you. Let's have a look. Okay, we've got 5 more minutes. So these are probably the last couple of questions I'm going to be able to answer. Bassinet naps are about 20-30 minutes tops. That was Lauren. Sorry, going back to that. Yes. So I would try going to the nap lengthening tips inside the nap guide for newborns. And then once bedtime's going better as he gets older and you can focus on sleep teaching at bedtime and lengthening that night's sleep, it is going to get easier. But this is a time of a lot of growth. This is a time of a lot of change. And you're doing great. You really are doing great. So it can be so beautiful and so tough. Okay, let me just go back to Ariana's question. Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't miss any. Lauren, that was the last one. Okay, Ariana, at what age do you suggest moving to a blanket and stuffed animals in the crib? Over 12 months at least. There is some piece of literature that suggests 15 months plus. So take that with a pinch of salt. Between 12 and 15 months is a good time if you want to introduce a lovey. With that said, honestly, I don't introduce blankets until the sleep sack becomes unhelpful or baby doesn't want to be in a sleep sack anymore, which is typically like 2 to 2.5 years old. So I wouldn't rush with the blanket in terms of like a blanket instead of a sleep sack. I much prefer sleep sacks. Like, they're so good, especially because they're so wiggly. Like, if you put a blanket on a 1-year-old, they are going to kick it off immediately and it's not going to be helpful. In terms of a lovey, Meg, if you could post my lovey blog. I have a whole blog about loveys and how to introduce them, what kind of lovey you should use, because they can be so helpful. Isabel has loveys. She has 2 now, but I started with 1. And then, or do you prefer to do, oh, sorry, I kind of answered this question already. Or do you prefer to do open leg sleep bag if baby walks in the crib, 1-year-old, eventually move to blanket? I actually love closed leg sleep bags as much as possible. I've seen the sleep bag walkers. I've never used them, but all so one of the best things about sleep bags and sleep sacks is that it helps to prevent them climbing out of the crib. So yeah, they have a hard time and they might like trip and fall a few times if they begin to stand and try and walk in the crib in their sleep sack. Both my girls have done that. They end up being really good at walking in a sleep sack, I'll have you know. But the sleep sack itself does such a good job at preventing crib climbing, which will be, I think, once they know how to do that, they're not going to want to go back. So my advice is to keep them in a sleep sack for as long as possible. Isabel's still in a sleep sack. She's 17 months. I plan to keep her in it for as long as possible. I have sizes all the way up to 3 years. Lily, we actually, how we transitioned her out of a sleep sack, my eldest, was that she was in her sleep sack till she was 2.5. She got a stomach bug and literally she was throwing up multiple times. It was really hard. But she literally, like, her sleep sack got ruined through all 3 of them. And we said to her, we were like, okay, all the sleep sacks are still drying or they need to be washed. We need to put you in a blanket. And then we just never looked back, and that was it. So usually it happens kind of naturally in that way. Okay, thank you for posting that, the blog. But yeah, I love sleep sacks. I think actually today, if any of you are on my email list today, I sent an email out about weighted sleep sacks, and in the email, I had a link to my Amazon shop. I don't know if Meg has a link to my Amazon shop, but if you do, post it in the chat, Megs. But I have an Amazon shop with a bunch of sleep sack suggestions. I do love Kite Baby, but they just raised their prices and they're quite expensive now. So if you can get them in the sale, they're so good and they last for so long, but you really don't need a fancy one. You don't. There are great sleepers that have the cheapest Burt's Bees or Halo, stuff like that works really good. I also suggest Once Upon a Child is another good one. Anyway, I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming. I really kind of want to do more of these. I've been thinking about offering like an option where I can do this once a month to anyone in my resources to kind of extend on anything. As I said before, I don't know if I said this before, so this nap pack is relatively new, like a bundle of all of my resources, and I would love if you find that one of your questions wasn't answered in the nap guide, in the 2-to-1 nap class, or the wake time vault, and you're wanting some elaboration on that, let me know. That is the beauty of this nap pack, is that because it's in the app on Kajabi, I can update it and you will get access to it, and anybody inside the nap pack will get automatic access to any updates. So it allows me to keep creating and being more helpful to you and anyone that joins in future. So let me know if you have additional questions or content ideas that I can elaborate on inside the nap pack. That was the whole point. I want to make it better and better. My plan is to do some audio walkthroughs of the nap guide and the wake time vault and kind of how to combine them. That's going to be coming soon, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, I'm always up for making it better. And then finally, if you found this helpful, send me a DM on Instagram if you liked this. I would love to hear from you and connect with you and find out what was helpful, what you'd like differently. And yeah, email hello@cozybabysleep.com with content suggestions. But yes, if you found this helpful, this Q&A today, send me a DM. I'd love to read it and chat with you. But good luck with the rest of the day. Happy napping, and I will see you soon. Bye.